Good evening to all, and before I start, I would like to say a few words. About the Islamic terrorist attack that took place this weekend in Australia and paralyzed the whole world. First, I want to express my solidarity with the Jewish community in Argentina and in the world in a global context in which anti-Semitism finds increase in the aberrant expressions, but I also want to issue an alert that this threat transcends the Jewish people. It is an attack on freedom itself, because that is undoubtedly the most sacred value of our Western culture, that each citizen can live out a peaceful, free life by associating and linking with whoever he wants and professing the faith that he wants within the framework of the law. This is what is at stake, and what the barbaric and inhuman terrorists wants us to renege. Acts like this by the enemies of freedom, and who are willing to kill in cold blood to impose their beliefs, remind us of the importance of the cultural battle that we are fighting, because injustice and evil triumph when the good remains indifferent to the woke virus that infects Europe and much of the free world. The other side defends the undefendable. That is why it is our duty is to continue sounding the alarm that what is wrong in condemning cases like what happened yesterday, or in daily cases that at first glance seem innocuous on the other hand, and in a happy news I would say almost much happier. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate José Antonio Kast, president elected from Chile, for his overwhelming victory in the election. And that I also extend a big hug to the Chilean people who today begins to live in a new era. This is one more sign that South America has awakened and has started to turn indefinitely towards the ideas of freedom, running from the calamity of socialism of the 21st century. Giving a formal start to today's speech, his foundation has become a triple walk in the cultural battle that we have been fighting for years and against culturalism. It is a great joy to be here again among friends at the end of year dinner of the Faro Foundation. I want to thank your president, Agustín Laje, a referent and pioneer of the cultural battle not only in our country but in all of Hispano-America, for his honorable invitation and for the work of all these years. I am sure that Agustín is one of the great artificers of the change of cultural paradigm that we are going through. So I want to ask for a big round of applause for Agustín. And I also want to thank the great Axel Kaiser and Adrian Rabier, that now is National Deputy for the Pampa. This foundation and others like them have a crucial role in the spiritual war that is being fought for the future of our country and the region. In this fight, our weapons are neither more nor less than our ideas, and the trench is every aspect of our daily life. It is a conflict without bullets and without violence, but with the lives of millions of people, both in the present and in future generations, will be decided. A war where every word well put, every debate won, every centimeter snatched from the left in the field of public opinion, is a conquest of every human being who aspires to return to live in freedom. Unfortunately, we start at a disadvantage, and we are clear for years we have neglected the cultural battle, ignoring that behind each human action there is an idea, and an idea does not need to be true to get fired, but it needs to be attractive. Citing Axel Kaiser, the fate or conceit was what led to the nightmare that ended yesterday in Chile. The left knows very well, and they have known how to present their lies as appetizing, giving hate and resentment a varnish of justice, equality, and solidarity. They did not take into account the consequences of the ideas, nor did they say such ideas could be realized. History has shown countless times the fatal results of their lies, but they continue enjoying an alarming popularity. Here I want to make to quote that fabulous economist who is Thomas Sowell, who says the best of socialism is that it sounds nice. The worst thing is that it never works, and in fact, we say it is always a failure in the economic, in the social, in the cultural, and we never forget that they killed 150 million people, who killed 150 million human beings. That is why we are focused not only on telling the truth, but also on learning to communicate. The Faro Foundation's three purposes as a beacon of light that illuminates men and shows them the path of truth and good, but not from the ivory tower in which liberalism knew how to close before the advance of statism, but in the language of the common man getting into the mud to debate the left is its own game in a world of darkness, darkened by layers upon layers of deceit and transgressions. What better thing than to have a lighthouse to return to our path out freedom? I speak of a world in darkness because this is not exclusively an Argentine evil, but a good part of the free world has gone down the path possessed by ideologies of death and walking together to collective suicide. To the left they vote. They win votes, that is to say, they managed to change the way in which they did. The powerful was not by violence, now I say by the arms of lies and with different strategies that did not come to the case to discuss today, but luckily, the continent is waking up and is roaring, screaming, long life freedom. Gauge. In all parts, the frenzied statism is eliminating individual freedoms, condemning free nations to the economic stagnation, to the progressive spiritual erosion, and the eventual extinction. If we persist in this direction, the West will become a footnote. A history. This is interesting because whose great works knew how to marvel the world according to the famous poem, but they ended up in oblivion, swallowed by the desert sand. It happens that the West have believed, defined and seduced by the song of Sarant of Keynesian statism, the philosophical style of the economy. They believed so intelligent and so greedy that they thought they could fool reality itself, blinded by their fate, arrogance. They believed that public spending, funded by monetary emissions with debt put to the service of stimulating consumption, was a way to hack the system, creating a kind of infinite wealth machinery. Is if life were a game of Sims. This is a clear example that an idea does not have to be true to become popular. In fact, I suspect that it is quite the opposite. Sometimes free human beings, the likes that lie to us and promise us prosperity at zero cost. I am going to tell you a very funny anecdote. Funny or sad, I do not know which we are going to put it later. There are people who could do it better than it could be Professor Crows or Professor Ravier, but thank you, Professor Crows, for being here. It is a privilege. If I'm wrong, the anecdote also rectifies me, and I have no problem. Let's say it had happened discussing strongly with Keynes, the deal on money. I say that at least it was still in the logic and within an analytical framework, respectable. Then when they were in the duel of that debate where Hayek had taken it seriously and it was working strongly to refuse it in one of the duels, Keynes says, I did not know what I see doing. Discussing this, if I no longer believe in it, he had changed her mind. And then that nefarious, sinister book appears in 1936, The General Theory of the Occupation of Interest and Money. I am containing. They believe that I am forcing myself, and he thought that book was so bad that he said it was not even worth discussing it. Cesar Part had spent so much time discussing the previous book and had changed his mind then, but it is a book so bad with so many errors that it is not worth discussing it, and it became almost the headline book of all populist politics, and the damage it has caused has been huge, but that is why it is no coincidence that the West is the most prolific culture in history in terms of utopian thought. In the 20th century, they wanted to sell us the earthly paradise of the state of welfare that as a response to Soviet socialism offered a dilated vision. At the same, I propose that they read the general theory has some aspects. I say, for example, the prologue of the edition in German where Mr. Keynes makes an ode to Nazism, or in the chapter's way, he deals with investment where he directly puts himself in favor of centralized planning. There are some very interesting chapters. That is why later when they want to sell, it is very interesting because some even treat Keynes as if he were a liberal. I say so that they get an idea of how fast the bow is not over. The example, they want to detect a recalcitrant leftist. To José Antonio Kast, they call him the ultra-rightist. Well, that means how fast to the left he is. You have seen several journalists making those references here, so I should not surprise them, but in the case of Keynesian thought, that has a lot of utopian. It is held that the free market in itself is insufficient to ensure growth and the correct use of the resources that is, and that gave more beyond their saying that one could count on a world with deeply diverse individuals, risked in complete insurance markets, or illiquid, that is to say, shallow, even if these people want. To exceed, therefore, society should evolve, that is. Clearly, between many quotes, made a system of central planning where experts, bureaucrats, now with many more quotes, should actively try and they actively intervene in the economy, incentivizing the other, removing resources from here, putting them there, obeying their whims and their economic alchemy. I passed the version translated to date. What would this be, for example? No good, the macro is fine, but the problem is the micro. I'm going to have fun for a while with this, sorry, but first, the macro is the sum of the micro, is to say, except that they are an economist of hypercontra quarter, and that has been hung in time beyond 1968 when we started to recover the micro. fundamentalists with the work of Friedman, the role of monetary policy, where it destroys the Phillips curve beyond that. A serious economist today make general balance intertemporal. In fact, who best captures this is Henry. Has it in a wonderful book and very basic that is called Economics in One Lesson, and say what is the difference between the good economist and the bad economist. The bad economist looks only at the market as a single period. The good economist not only looks at a market in this market, but the interaction with the other markets, and not only today, but also the future consequences. Then, first point, there is no difference between micro and macro. For the one, he makes general balance, except that they are terrible economists now, and it is also in this book, which is called The Salvation of the X Industry. In the background, those who say they're no good, but this government takes care of the micro thinks that they tell me that because in reality they would only take care of the micro. The corrupt, because if there is something that has been learned in a world that is something called don't pick the winners, that is not choosing the winners, then if you're talking about saving a sector, you have to throw money at that sector. And the question is, if you are choosing that sector wins because they are getting money, the question is where the money comes from. It comes from the trees. I don't know where it comes from, because with something they are going to have to pay. That is, if it is with aid protection, we are going to be ruining the lives of 47 million humans, that it will be in prices in goods of low quality at higher price. The other alternative is what I do, charge taxes. Explicit ally revamp growth. Implicit, what I do, I emit money, that is generate inflation. That is, I do it against the most vulnerable, who say they want to say that they want me to do it with punishing future generations. Then the reality is that in the background what they are doing this lobby is pure corruption. That is to say, a liberal government to what is dedicated to leveling the field. God is in charge of respecting natural rights, the right to life, freedom, and private property, respecting the principle of non-aggression. Then once they leveled the field for the individual's work, if you choose, when you have those who talk about the micro, they guys who are doing lobbies, they are corrupt. Then when they say that I don't take care of the micro thanks, because it shows that this is an honest government. In the end, in these schemes that they produce, they violate property rights. Natural rights are subordinated to the state criterion and can be trampled at ease under the excuse of the common good or some exceptional circumstance. As Albert Nook said in Our Enemy, the State, the book is a family of books that I love. Our Enemy, the State, is one that I have particular affection. The state has known how to take advantage of each contingency to gain power at the expense of society. Its vision of the world, however, far from ensuring sustained economic growth, only ensured the perpetual expansion of the state of a life, liberty in the property of individuals who they decided in their bosom. The state promised people security in exchange for their freedom, and those who accepted the exchange ended up losing one and the other. There is a phrase by Milton Friedman about it that says that the societies that value freedom over equality They get a lot from both. When they did the opposite, they value equality over freedom. They did not get either under Leviathan. Valentine by the priests of status and believed that it could be balanced over the entire private sector, and this happened because he stopped believing that there was a legal limit to his insatiable fiscal appetite. Instead of administering better resources as the members of the party of the state promised, he ended up administering it badly, something that should not call our attention because in the book Free to Choose from Milton Friedman and Ray Friedman, there is a chapter that is about public spending and talks about the 4 ways to spend. You can spend your money or that of others, and you can spend it on you or on others. Then, for example, when you spend your own money on yourself, you maximize benefits because you know what you want, yes, because they know their own preferences, and also they know effectively what it costs them to earn it. Then they calculate costs and benefits, and if they do not G-rate, they pay it in terms of personal well-being, with which they land quickly. The other way is to spend your own money on others. I say that what are those other gifts one tries to let go to as little as possible. That is what it does, is minimization the cost. The other alternative is to spend the money of others on oneself. If they can't pay the other, how many times have you seen people? In a time I traveled a lot, and then I found myself with a person. When they call to get on the plane, it goes in the not even an executive, it goes in first, and it makes me a whole explanation of why I traveled in the first place, how good it is. What happens is that I traveled a lot. And then one day I find it in the airport home vacation time. Then when the call arrives for the first time, I said I did not follow. Of course, I traveled in the casino as I traveled with the whole family, and as I did not pay with a corporate card and paid with my own there, if I took care of the money, then given this, which is in the worst way to spend, is to spend the money. In others, God, that is called the welfare state can work. No. Because the politician does not experience the cost of the private sector suffers. How painful it is to pay taxes, and neither does he know what we want better than us, therefore it will always be bad. That's why what is the best policy that a government can do to crush the state? We lower the consolidated fiscal deficit of 15 points of the GDP to 0. And not only that, but we also lower 2.5 points of the GDP of taxes. And we will continue on the same path of lowering the expense and lowering taxes. And in this moment, someone enters with the prize, the social benefactor of the year. And we are going to give it to Toto Capisa. Thank you for being the best economist, best minister of economy in history. It is a common mistake of the left to conceive of the state as a god who is above men, ignoring that those who manage it are effectively men, and the state then becomes a boutique of money and power to be conquered, and the bigger the state, the bigger the boutique, and all the countries where the state's encouraged in this way and the private sector live. Waste and bad investment were the rule here. There is a case that is not real, is a metaphor, of course, because God is not going to miss the tip. They saw that sometimes there are some who are exceeded in Literacy, that is the example that I usually make of the bridge ministry. You have two communities separated by a river. Then they discover that they're separated by a river. Then they discover that if they commercialize a level of life for the two societies, they are going to improve. Notice for those who have trained us in this is not only the absolute advantage of Smith that one is better in one thing, the other is better in another, and then there they trade. One can be better in everything than the other, and also the place for commerce, which is the comparative advantage of Ricardo, or in terminology of the Austrians, principles of association of Ricardo, because it is not only portrayed, it is valid for all things. That is for those who say that if one regulates the market, there is no work for all. That is a lie, that is false. But hey, that is another of the things that we have to deal with. That does not come now in a case, but then I usually do then what do the two societies discover that if they trade, they will live better. Then they agree to make a bridge. Then what happens if you have the state that does then the bridge ministry makes that bridge and looks for where to make produce. There comes a time when you can't make more bridges because there are no cities to unite. Then what does it do? It subverts the Ministry of Water and creates cease to make what more bridges. There is a state than you have now. The Ministry of Water, the Ministry of the Bridge, and everything is to hire people, and everything is about accumulating power, creating offices and other dependencies. While we arrive, we lower the number of ministries and pass. That's what it's about. Sorry, then this led to all the societies in which policy was practiced to stagnation and decadence. And what was the solution? That always promotes stagnation, more state, more expenses, more taxes, more monetary falsification, creating a loop of infinite statism until you get to the situation that we live in Argentina at the end of 2023. Basically, what does the state do to you? It breaks your legs. It charges heat taxes to later tell you that it gives you the tickets which you buy overpriced goods, and also demands that give thanks. That's a short, well, that it's a small sample of what we received. And although we get tired of showing historical statistical data on the superiority of free company capitalism regarding statism, this was not enough to win the battle for the ideas, because the difference between them and us is spiritual. We need to respond to the moral arguments that the statistics exclaim with argument of the same nature. This is fundamental. If we do not understand this, we are afraid we can have a great management like the one we have. We can have a planning politics like the one we have shown in recent elections, but we cannot stop fighting the cultural battle, because if we did not fight that cultural battle, then we will have 4 years of liberalism, 8 years, 12, 16, 20, but these people never give up because they live to suck the other's blood. They're professional vampires, and we say that is, they never want to work. That is, they're permanent vampires with the incentive which is always to suck blood from another. Because before, we remember Marx preferred that his children die before going to work. These guys are experts. Yes, in looking for justifications to eat out of the pocket of another person. It is not enough to show statistics. If they control the definition of good and evil, of just and unjust, we have to end in that field and win them, because economic growth by itself, if it is unfair and unequal, they say it will always get lost in the moral arena. There is a book that fascinates me, it seems to me. Dazzling, it is a book that impacted me strongly. which is a book by Israel Keisner with C. Keisner with C. Please. The book is called Creativity, Capitalism, and Distributive Justice. The book is wonderful for how does Israel culture raise it from the promotes as there are no doubts that the capitalist system of free company is more productive, is more efficient. There are no doubts, there are no doubts, but the left says it is unfair, says it is unfair, and the most interesting thing of what Israel says is if the system is unfair as much as it is more productive, it does not deserve to be defended. And that I have the privilege that many of my ministers are here too, which I thank you for being present to the ministers of the best government in history like it are not to the left of different. And what is the interesting thing about Israel Kirchner? But he says, if the system is unfair, it is not worth being defended. That is to say, both in the first cabinet meeting as in the one we had recently, given the exchanges after the huge elections that made both the Minister Boric in Capital Federal like Liz Peche in Mendoza. We had to make an exchange, then I had to renew the huge election of Vicente Licores. Then I had to repeat the talk because nothing. The public is changing. Then I saw how, says Marta Legrand. Then one repeats because the public is changing. Then our goal is to become the freest country in the world. And for that we have a set of objectives, but the most important, not all instruments are valid. We do not receive, we do not solve the problems with utilitarian questions. We solve by moral criteria. There are things that are wrong to us. They told us at the beginning of the year that we were not going to open the sepulchre because it was an electoral year. And however, when we had the money to open the sepulchre, despite what they said, all political utilitarianism, the moral solution was to open it, was to return the freedom to the Argentines, and we did it. Not only that during this year, we had under 8 months of permanent attack on the economic program. We had to endure a dollarization of never seen the Argentine history of 42% of M2. The speculative attack was $41 billion, and yet look how strong that is, the program that today is standing, and Argentina is growing again. Therefore, this is as Huerta de Soto says in the theory of dynamic efficiency. Efficiency and justice are two sides of the same coin. You cannot sacrifice justice to the altar of efficiency. They cannot do that. Nothing can be efficient if you are sacrificing justice, that is to say, all that part of the literature where the economists and the name of the optimists of Pareto do interventions omit the damage they are causing to solve the supposed phase-out. Market, we say the problem is this is when you are talking of colors, someone not evident They are literally blind. And faced with reality, we have the fault that they do not understand how human action works. That is to say, that they do not understand what the market is. The market is a process of social cooperation where they voluntarily exchange property rights. But they like the intervention more. That is the reality. They like the power of God. Do not let yourself be deceived, because also linked to the power there is money then. The interesting thing about the argument of Israel Kirzner is that leverage on the principle of appropriation of Locke and the idea of take of the market as a process of discovery shows that the capitalist system of free association is not only more efficient, but it is the only system that is fair. Therefore, when we defend freedom, not only are we defending efficiency, we are defending a system that is fair. And if they saw what is the argument, they have the argument that they'd make the capitalism in reality in the best, but is a necessary evil, and they can concede that it generates growth, but they say that this growth is fair and unequal. Then the state is able to intervene and to solve it. This is a non-trivial issue that we have to put it on the discussion table. This is key. We have dedicated these 2 years to put the economy in order to stabilize. Yes, it is the most successful stabilization process in history, not only of Argentina, but of the world, because when we said that we were going today, that we were going to put the public sector in a box in a year, they said that it was impossible, that as most we could adjust a point per year, that we were not going to be able to finish the mandate in tax balance, and we did it in the Treasury in the first month. And in 6 months, we closed the quasi-fiscal deficit that no one put it into the campaign. And when we made that adjustment that implied, for example, the 30% of the public spending, they said that we were going to sink into a recession and that unemployment was going to explode. However, by April 24, the economy hit bottom and it began to expand strongly, and the indicator of the demarcated December ended at more than 6% above the 23, with the real salaries growing, and we took 12 million people out of poverty. And in the middle, we also eliminated the managers of poverty. I say that the burrito, Sandra. And the reality is that what we demonstrated is that the adjustment can be done, and that it is expansive. Then how is this? We end up breaking all the textbooks by the depth of the adjustment, by the speed of the adjustment, and especially the thing by the results, because clearly when you adjust the public sector, they are returning resources to the private sector. And as the private sector is more productive than the public sector, the economy expands and flourishes. And then we have to be very clear. This because the economy was growing strongly in the first quarter. Almost 6% had accelerated in the second to levels of 8%. Until in the month of May, we had a very strong electoral triumph in city, thanks to Manuel, who was and gave that battle. At that time, inflation hit the 1.5%. And the policy began to be theirs. They sanctioned us. about 40 laws trying to destroy the bonds that we had achieved with so much effort. And obviously, that shocked the country's risk, made the interest rates rise. And that generated a fall in the demand for money, and that is what made that in the following months the inflation rate was accelerating, but of course that is to tell that story and admit the risk. Many economists should accept that they are failed and they wanted everything. Then they deny the Bucharest, the country's risk was 1,500, and the day after the election by magic fell to half. And based on that, also the opposite of that, of checking that the demand for money had been destroyed, is that basically recently Vladimir Pavlik, the central vice, published what was the whole exit of the speculative attack of how the system. It came out of the peso, but it came out of the peso at levels such that the levels of monetization of the Argentine economy fell far below the level that they had in the time of the previous government, with inflation traveling at the pace of 300% and with the possibility of accelerating to levels of 17,000 per year. That is to say, the levels of monetization fell from the central monetary passives, fell to undue levels. That is to say, not only the individuals went and bought dollars, but that the companies even destroyed working capital. And we could support all that. Look, if the economic program is solid, that I could support all that. And now the road to reconstruction and growth begins. Then, this is important because as long as we are successful in terms of economic growth, it is more we pursue economic growth with three pillars. Already with security in order, because it fits. Remember that we had 9,000 BICs per year today. It is zero thanks to the management of Minister Birch and now our Minister Alejandro Monti Oliva. We put inflation in order thanks to the Ministry of Economy and the Central Bank. And now the stage of economic growth begins, and the economic growth stage has three engines. One is deregulation, and where deregulation will release growing yields, it will accelerate economic growth. Federico is around here. No, it is feet there, he's. And the man of the world is the man of the world. The man of the world is the man of the world. Thanks you.
Ahí está. Y el hombre de los rendimientos crecientes. 13.000 reformas. Gracias. La otra pata es capital humano.
Thank you, Sandra.
Gracias, Sandra.
The other foot is the opening thanks Popper's back. Not only was it key to dismantle the bomb with Santi or Rosalie, that there was in central bank, but now it is also an example of the Chancellor. Now when we do all that and the economy begins to grow strongly, what is going to be the mess? It is going to come, and it is going to say that inequality is generated, and they are going to come to attack with that. So in that context, what we have to do is be prepared to give that. Discussion, and that discussion is a moral discussion. You have to tell them in their face that social justice is a thieving because it implies an unequal treatment. Before the law preceded by a robbery, then you have to go, and you have to go for the moral battle. And that is why it is so important. What we see here from the Faro Foundation, because this system is the one that allows man to flourish and relate with his peers in the best possible way, because it is the most just system of all, given that it guarantees that the fruits of the effort are in the hands of those who worked hard in the first place. In fact, the Creator, when he expelled him and he told him, "You will win the bride with the sweat of your forehead, that is not with the sweat of the other person's forehead, I see in fact the robberies." Prohibited in the Ten Commandments. It is more, you should not covet other people's good either. I say no and other things. I say that he has the last of the commandments, and it is more, I say, from God, as Thomas Sowell said, what is social justice, envy, more rhetoric. That is to say that Thomas Sowell himself for secessions, when did envy stop? Being a capital sin got to become a virtue that is social justice. No, then. Unlike the so-called social justice that is tremendously unfair, given that implies robbery of some through the exercise of social force to distribute it between friends and customers, that is, or in the case of Kutcherism, he did it by bribing people. Not because in the background, it is not a policy more than, let's say, to go and buy foods in an elegant way, but it does not stop being that. No, then, to understand this, we have to understand that we liberals believe that God gave men the earth in its set, and that they divided it to manage. A man has a natural right given by God to decide what he does with his body and with his work, because without the right he has nothing. This also implies that he has the right to stay with the fruits of the sweat of his forehead. That is, the liberals believe that property rights are a natural right. It is a contract prior to the state that orders the lives of individuals, and that makes it very clear the difference between good and evil. It is to be owners of nothing more and nothing less than up time, and the state only arises from the consent between man and exists to manage the conflicts that appear between them. But the liberals are well aware that the state only takes its right and its authority of the natural right of individuals. In fact, that the existence of the state is justified because we have failed as a society to manage our conflicts. Martin must have a lot of conflicted then, no? What you have to deal with all the statists, on the other hand, believe that God is the state. Believe that the state precedes all other rights and can trample on the individual to his desire. Believe that the will and the right of individuals is always subordinate to the reason of the state, and that is why they believe that property rights are little more than a contingency on which the state has the prerogative of God. They remember the impresentable, and that he said that in a pandemic there are no rights, and then those people come to accuse to say, I don't know what I say, these things happened here. No, those believe that the state can do whatever they want with life, the freedoms and the property of the people to have their time at their will. That is why they believe that there is no morality in trampling those rights unilaterally, always, and when it is in possession of a common good that they determine it. They are so fatally arrogant that they believe that they are the representatives. They are the ironies of the function of utility of the people. It is incredible. Not technically it would come to be like this, then it is more the state cannot miss as long as it is obvious that they manage it. Because when they manage it to someone who truly believes the natural rights of the individuals, suddenly everything is a violation of rights acquired. They so that they pass it on, saying, when they do not govern, they are not democratic, they are fascists, they are Nazis, as it was. Where is the fallacy of Hitler, the Hitler fallacy at Hitler? That is to say, they are all Not as they put a label and disqualify the whole world. That is why here is the moral and spiritual difference that underlies all the economic differences that populate. By the surface and the key to be able to disarm their fallacies, the liberals believe that men are truly owners of those who have their owners of their bodies and the fruits of their work. On the contrary, the statist priests believe that we are all mere tenants of our goods, but whose real owner is the state that benevolently allows us to use its temporary fruit with the right to revoke it when it pleases him. That is why when they stop controlling the state, they immediately begin to cry for fascism and authoritarianism, because they really think that they are the only ones who possess the truth revealed and the authority to govern, as they want the rest, and obviously the handling of the boxes. They see us, the rest, as not as citizens, that the slaves to their service, and being far from the common power is for them like losing freedom, and that is why a different socialist approaches to the economy fail, be openly or communists with wave no chic, no, they're the social democrats, or the statist models end up taking away from man true property and therefore true responsibility for his future, when all is of all, nothing is of anyone except the regimes of the state, and that is why they seek to seize power. The state then turns the citizen into its slave, which returns it to the vulnerable economies, to the problems of the slave economy, the indolence, the laziness, and the lack of ambition. On the other hand, when men know themselves and know the fruit of their work, all their actions are ordered to lead the best possible life within the framework of the law, because freedom and responsibility are two sides of the same coin. There is no one without the other. Some men, they come away that they are responsible for all their actions. They are responsible for their virtues and their weaknesses, of their successes and their mistakes. So they also recognize that they are surely free. In this freedom is responsible for what makes them able to create. For that reason, to spread the liberal ideas in this global moment is a new liberating gesture of slavery, to which the perverted states objected, as because economic growth depends almost completely on individuals being able to perform with freedom in the world, to create and innovate under the protection of a law that protects them, and that they know that they will be owners of the fruit of all their effort and sacrifice. And economic growth must be a desire of any state that presides over it, given that it implies a constant improvement of the quality of life of all and each of its citizens. But for this process to be consolidated, the state must also play a necessary role. It has to do its part by protecting the borders, protecting the population of overwhelming by its neighbors, and protecting macroeconomic stability. It is interesting because one of the laws that we are sending to the Congress makes those politicians who sanction or promote and vote laws that involve public spending put up counterparting income, that is to say, that violent in the tax balance of the violent in the monetary balance are going to go to jail, because they will have a sentence of 1 to 6 years. The populist massacre is over. In short, the state must protect this divine light, this lighthouse that illuminates the soul of free men and gives them a natural right to be owners of their work, must protect it as something sacred and safeguard it from old age, both of its neighbors and of itself, because if the role of the state is much bigger than the left is to take care of the minorities, there is no minority smaller than the individual who must be constantly protected from the care of the majority. This lighthouse is the moral key to prosperity and long-term growth, a light that for a long time the West is forgotten, and it is necessary to find again. That is why I want to thank you all for being here today and for your constant support to the dissemination of the ideas of freedom. That you have very happy holidays, that God bless you all, that the force so heavily accompanies us, and long live freedom, Kawaju.